Good morning. Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Monday, June the 16th, 2025. And not a great day yesterday for us Aussie boxing fans. Well, most of us Aussie boxing fans. There would have been a few out there that wasn't too stressed about the result and maybe would have been rooting for it to happen. I don't know. But as a whole, yeah, not a great day. George Kambosos coming up short against Richardson Hitchens in a, well, I suppose there's no other way around it, a very one-sided stoppage win in New York. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's start with what happened on this day. Start with 1979. Puerto Rico's great champion Wilfredo Gomez defended his WBC 122-pound title by knocking out Julio Hernandez in 5 rounds. That was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. In 1995, France's Fabrice Tiosso won the WBC light heavyweight title by defeating Mike McCallum on points. The late, great Mike McCallum, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago. 2001, Jose Luis Castillo knocked out Korea's Sung Ho Yu in the first round for the WBC lightweight title. That was in Mexico. 2012, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. defended his WBC middleweight title with a knockout of Andy Lee, the Irishman, in El Paso, Texas. Now, the other one that took place, or other fight that took place on this day, which was massive, and we talked about him yesterday, probably suffering his worst loss of his career, but this one was probably one of his best wins of his career. It is Roberto Duran, the Hands of Stone. He became the 7th fighter in history to become a 3-division world champion when he knocked out Davey Moore in the 8th round back in 1983. That was at Madison Square Garden as well. And what a night that was for Duran. I think it was his birthday as well. And I've watched that fight numerous times, and people thought he was washed up. Duran, Davey Moore was a young up-and-coming champion, a New York native, and it was at his, well, I suppose we'll call it his home stadium. And Roberto Duran turned up, and pretty much all the crowd was for him. And they really willed him to probably, I think, besides the Leonard fight, probably the best performance of his career. I mean, I know he won and defended the lightweight title numerous times. But as far as just the importance goes and where he was in his career and what, you know, the experts and everyone thought where he was at in his career, to come out and do that to Davey Moore and knock him out in the 8th round. I sort of felt for Davey Moore because it was his hometown or home city, and not to say they turned on him, they just outnumbered him, but it was almost like a ravenous pack of dogs in the crowd that were just willing Duran on to really hurt this guy. And when he went down, you know, he was battered, he's bruised, his face was swollen, and that right hand that dropped him, and the crowd just went nuts. And as I said, I sort of felt sorry for him in his hometown, and everyone's just hoping for his demise and going nuts when he was clearly getting his ass handed to him, wasn't he? But yeah, Roberto Duran, what a champion he was. And I think after that he might have went up and fought Hagler, or was that beforehand? Whatever it was. But the Hearns fight would follow this a year later, which obviously didn't end too well for him, the Hands of Stone. So that was on this day, back in 1983. All right, on to yesterday's fight. Look, if I'm being honest, there's really not a lot to say. I mean, there was the usual build-up with George. I was pretty happy with the build-up as far as I could see that glint in his eye again, the same that he had against Lopez. He seemed to have found the spark and the fire that maybe hadn't been there since he got a reality check against Devin Haney. Remember when he fought Haney for the first time in Melbourne, and after he'd won the belts, and he was just so sure of himself in a good way, and he really played the persona of that, you know, that lightweight champion and the cocky little Greek/Italian fighter. And then when he, as I said, got a very harsh reality check by dropping pretty much every round against Devin Haney, his demeanour sort of changed, his aura sort of changed, and then He obviously was beaten again just as comprehensively in the rematch. And I just had a feeling he became just a little bit gun-shy after that. He wasn't, I mean, he still talked it up a little bit as well, but in my opinion, he just didn't regain that swagger. He scraped through against Maxi Hughes, fought Lomachenko, and he didn't really have a chance to be the George we've all sort of known, because Lomachenko just refused to engage in any hostilities or trash talking. So he really didn't have a dance partner, did he, in the lead up to that fight? And then I think that, not to mention the overall class and everything that Lomachenko brought to the table, he made easy work of George in that fight. But I was hoping with this fight that Hitchens would drag out that same Kambosos that fought Lopez. But what it did sort of drag out is what looks to be a faded former champion who is, obviously, or looks to have definitely reached the end of the road. And it's just a shame. I thought, as I said in the lead up to it, I thought that he looked ready to go. We looked in really good condition. Mentally, there was no issues that we could see anyway. He looked like I said, that old George, and his dad was in fine form. Everyone was in fine form. And then they got in the ring and the bell went, and it was just anything but. I just thought right from the word go, you could probably tell the difference in size. That's probably the first thing that stuck out to me, was just how big Hitchens looked. And George, to me, I mean, at 140, I didn't notice it against Jake Wiley in his first fight a few months back, but he just looked a little bit soft to me. Now, I know that's not a very nice thing to say to an elite athlete, but he just didn't look hard. When he was at lightweight, he looked hard. So I don't know whether going up in weight has affected him just a little bit by taking away a little bit of his speed. I know he's not the most powerful guy, so that wasn't really going to be affected at lightweight or 140. He's not a big puncher, but the size difference was stark, as well as him being a bit soft, or softer. I thought the first round was okay. But to me, I just looked at Hitchens and thought, he is so relaxed and comfortable here. As soon as George threw a jab, I think he threw a jab to the head and maybe a jab to the body, which were nice snappy punches. The look on Hitchens' face, it did not even blink, did not budge. And I thought, he knows this is going to be his night, and George has really got nothing to offer him. But I thought the first round was close-ish. I still gave it to Hitchens. I thought that jab, just a snapping jab, wasn't it? Just a really cracking jab that snapped George's head back a couple of times. And even I think he had him marked up a little bit after the first round as well. But then as the fight sort of got into its groove, the second and third rounds, I mean, it was evident very, very early that this was, well, I won't say it's a mismatch. If you're in the fight, you're in the fight, like it's at that level, you're in the fight. But it was just apparent straight away, or around that mark, that Hitchens was just a different type of fighter that I think George expected. And that cracking jab was snapping his head back repeatedly. He was being countered repeatedly. And what got me is that one thing that stood out really, was stark to me, is that every time George would jab to the body, Hitchens would just time it and just crack him with the right hand. And for 8 rounds, that just did not change. George could not, maybe he couldn't see it, he couldn't adapt to it, whatever it was, but he kept getting hit with that counter right hand. And just as the rounds went on, you could see George getting marked up more and more every round. You could see the frustration. I just thought after about the 5th round, was that the round he got hurt in, I think? But he just looked like a defeated fighter. Even after that 5th round, he just looked, he looked dejected, he looked beaten, he looked like a fighter that had seen his best days. That's probably the only way I can describe it. Now, whether that's accurate, maybe he hasn't seen his best days. He's just been simply outclassed by a better fighter on the night, and he's maybe got to take a step back or whatever it might have been. I don't know. But either way, it was just all one-way traffic, and it was just round after round after round. It'd be nice to do a review of the fight where, you're sort of telling the tale of 8 different type of rounds, but it really was just the same, rinse and repeat. I think it was the 5th round, yeah, where he was hurt to the body, which really surprised me as well. That George, we saw it against Lomachenko, of course, where he was hurt to the body, but yes, so look, Hitchens is not a big puncher. He's not renowned as a body puncher either, but obviously he'd taken note of the Lomachenko fight and saw that George is susceptible to the body. But I just thought the height of Hitchens and the stocky sort of compact style of George, that he would be very hard to hit to the body by Hitchens, but it wasn't the case. He went down low, and just seemed like as soon as he switched to the body, he had success and hurt George and almost had him gone in that 5th round, because if you've ever been hurt to the body, there's nothing worse. He was obviously winded, and then he couldn't defend himself, and he was sucking in the big breaths, and Hitchens obviously picked up on it and really went to town on him and almost got him out of there. And I thought, not so much after the 5th, but definitely after the 6th, I thought that maybe they could have stopped the fight. I know it's a championship fight and all that sort of stuff, but he hadn't won a round. He was really getting beat up. And for me, I don't think Hitchens had even got into second gear by that stage. He was just peppering George at will. I thought he was playing with George. I thought he really, if he wanted to, could have ended the fight any time. And I don't like to say that about the fight, because, I mean, George was in there doing his best. It was a tough fight for him. But I just thought that... but Hitchens was, yeah, as I said, was just in second gear and was just doing as he pleased. So I thought it would have been a good case after the 6th round, maybe for the corner to call it off. The one thing about the corner that surprised me, and especially at the level, is that in between rounds, I can't remember who his trainer's, or what his trainer's name is. I didn't actually see a lot of him in camp, if I'm being honest either. But having his say, and then George's dad, Jim, either talking over the trainer or then pretty much saying something completely different. So it would have been really confusing for George. Now, maybe he was used to it and maybe he wasn't fussed about it, but for what it sort of looked to me is that the trainer would say something, George would nod, and then Jim would come over and sort of yell something else at him, and really you could see sort of George sort of look at him, and not to say it would have made any difference whatsoever, by the way, but that's the reason why I think sometimes you've really got to select your team properly about who's going to be in the corner. No dramas with Jim, you know, being his advisor, his manager, whatever it is, and being involved in the lead up and all that sort of stuff. But I just think, like a lot of dads in the corner, I just don't think it's a good idea. I really don't. And I think Tyson Fury did it with his dad, John, where he wasn't in the corner for that last fight. And I think, and I do like Jim, don't get me wrong. I've met him numerous times, and he's really opened the door for me in a few different things when I was away, and sort of invited me into the inner sanctum of Team Kambosos when I was over there. So it's not a shot at him personally, but I just think the dynamic of the two, I just think that maybe, as I said, being involved in all the lead up and all the press conferences, all that stuff, he really does add some colour to it. But as far as being in the corner, I just don't think it sits well. And to the point, with the trainer, I don't know, they've obviously been, I think he was with him with the Lomachenko fight. I can't remember his name, apologies. I know some of you out there will, but it just looked to me that, or I would have thought that the trainer would have sort of said, hey, Jim, butt out. This is what I'm being employed to do, is to train George. There's no use me, and of course couldn't do it in front of George, but to say, even before the fight, to say, look, you know, I know you've got your opinions and you say, but this is the reason I'm the boxing trainer. I've obviously got an extensive history in boxing, a lot of experience. Jim hasn't. So I would have thought that, yeah, something would have been maybe said that, you know, the trainer said, I'll do the talking, you just wash his mouthpiece and give him a pat on the back and keep encouraging him. I don't know, but to give him advice, I just thought it was confusing, that's all. Now, maybe, as I said, George is used to it and they do it all the time, and, you know, it doesn't really matter, or maybe they had the talk and maybe Jim just didn't listen. I don't know, but that just seemed a bit confusing to me, and I'm sure it would have been a little bit confusing to George. But as I said, it wouldn't have made much difference because it was all one-way traffic. And then in the 8th round, and I think Hitchens was actually calling to George's corner to stop the fight too, wasn't he? But look, That final left rip to the body, just a beautiful shot. But again, I was really surprised of the effect that it had on George. Now, obviously, it was a good shot, but the way George is low and compact, I was just surprised that Hitchens was able to land those body shots that easily. But look, we weren't in there. We don't know. It obviously had an effect because George went down hard and the referee waved it off, and a really good stoppage, I thought, too. Technically, maybe could have let him continue because it was only body shots that put him down, but I just think he was gone. He was outclassed, and as I said, the referee made the right call. Afterwards, I thought Hitchens spoke really well, as did George. I thought both guys spoke really well, considering the hostilities and the build up to the fight. Jim was a bit quiet, as you could probably expect. You could see the disappointment on his face, but I thought George was very respectful. Hitchens was very respectful as well. Thought spoke like a winner should. He called out Haney and Lopez and these types of guys, and I'm sure he'll get his opportunity at them. But I suppose the question comes now, or what comes now, is what next for the fighters. And Hitchens has got those fights to look forward to, but George, I don't know. Well, I think I do know. I think his time at that top level is finished. I think it's pretty obvious that at that weight, and the current state of where he's at physically, mentally, his age, everything else, he's done at that level. He can't compete at that level. He was, but again, I don't like to say it, but he was non-competitive against Haney, and I suppose to some extent Lomachenko as well. But that's boxing. That's just what happens in the sport. He's made a lot of money out of it, and good on him. He's obviously sacrificed a lot, so he should be very, very happy with that. But it's such a hard game, and at the level. So I think I don't think he's the type of fighter though that will come back to Australia and fight domestically. I think once he's 32, I think there's only one really fight left for him if he's serious maybe about giving it one more crack, not at world level. I think that ship has well and truly sailed. But I'm talking about maybe that big domestic fight with Liam Paro. That still has legs. And the reason it has legs is because even though George is coming off this loss, Liam, he's got his fight coming up, next week or the week after, whatever it is. He's still trying to rebuild his career. Now, he might be limited as far as those big fights to get himself another shot. Now, it won't probably mean a lot rankings-wise for Liam if he fought George, but neither would probably any other fighters are going to look to put him in with, while he's with no limit, until he gets that world title shot. So I think that makes the most sense. As far as money and build-up, it would still be a big fight here in Australia, and it just allows Liam to continue to progress to another world title shot. As I said, it won't do a hell of a lot for his ranking, but it's still a name. And I think that would be, he could either fight an international opponent and probably get paid whatever he gets paid, but if he could fight George Kambosos and probably make 5 times what he'd make just on a normal no-limit show. So I think that makes sense. The only thing is timing and all that sort of stuff. George, you wouldn't have thought, would look to fight again maybe this year. He's had 2 fights in quick succession, which is not like him. He normally fights once every 12 months to 15 or 16 months. That's just the way he's fought in the last few years. And he's had 2 fights pretty much back-to-back. So you'll probably think that with what happened yesterday, they would pull him out for the rest of the year and maybe look at it early next year. So maybe that does work in with Liam. Who knows? Maybe he gets his fight over with end of this month, and then maybe has one more fight towards the end of the year, and then maybe they look at fighting George early in the year. That's the only fight for me. And I think even though George said he wasn't quite sure yesterday, I think he knows inside that his time at that really elite world level is done. He's had 2 cracks at the world title, 3 if you count the rematch with Haney. 3 cracks at winning another world title since he lost it to Haney the first time. I know it's the IBO in there as well. I'm not counting that, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But yeah, he's had the rematch with Haney. He's had Lomachenko and now Hitchens, and come up short. And it's not like they were really close fights, split decisions or disputed decisions or just competitive losses. They were all pretty one-sided. So yeah, it's a shame. But look, it's every fighter's career. The chapter, we come to the last chapter and it ends, and that just seems to be the way with George. But I'm certainly not going to do the pylon like I've seen a lot of people yesterday with what they said about George. I suppose with a fighter's point of view, I just respect him so much for what he's done for Australian boxing. Like him or not, he has done wonders for Aussie boxing. Some might argue that's not the case with the way he carries on, but no, look, I think when he beat Lopez back in 2021, that was a magical moment for Aussie boxing. The biggest probably moment we've had since 2017 when Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao, and I think just inspired a few other fighters that give some good performances as well, including Liam Paro. So all the best to George with whatever he plans to do. There was one other fight yesterday, including an Aussie. Didn't end well either. Jackson Murray. Ooh. Talk about if you talk it up, you got to back it up. This is a guy that's been very vocal here in Australia, and obviously has got way ahead of himself as far as where he stands. He's been pretty vocal about calling people out and showing up at press conferences and all that sort of stuff. Jackson Murray. Well, he went in yesterday, and I can't remember his name. I didn't write it down. He was the guy that Justice Hooney stopped in 2 rounds last year. Well, he's gone out and wiped out Jackson Murray in 1 round. Pretty brutal fashion too. I mean, I hope Jackson Murray's okay, but sometimes karma has a way of catching up with you, and I just think or hope that what happened yesterday, even though obviously I hope he's okay, but I'm more than hoping that this will be a wake-up call to him, that maybe wait until you got the runs on the board before you start sort of running at the mouth a little bit. But I'm sure he'll be back. Boxing has a great way of just laying the karma train right at your feet, doesn't it? But as I said, I hope he's doing okay today. From all accounts, he is. So that's the main thing. But got to be humble. You've got to be humble until you've got the runs on the board. And as I said, he had been talking up a lot and came undone yesterday. So he will have to regroup and come back and reevaluate and maybe just reassess where he's at and just maybe just get a few runs on the board before he starts that again. But anyway, guys, look, that's going to do it for today. Give me your thoughts about George. What do you think where he's at? What do you think of the performance yesterday? I mean, as I said, there's not really much to say about the performance. It was just the only way to define it was just a one-sided beatdown, and that's just the reality. But as I said, all the best to him going forward. So guys, have a great Monday, and we'll catch you tomorrow.